Alright everyone, you know what time it is. It's time for character analyses for all the characters that join in part 4 and maybe one that I forgot in part 3. I'm going to be doing this for the next hour or so, and I couldn't talk for an hour straight even if I tried, so I've invited my friend and co-host Raisins. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, Mekkah. Thanks for having me on. I can talk for an hour. I'm pretty sure you can too. Don't lie. You've done it before, right? So no,
True,
I'm kidding.
true, but it does help to have a moment to breathe every now and then.
Yeah, no. It's definitely refreshing to have your opinions on here too, and like bounce ideas off of you. These are always like highlights of the runs, right? Whenever we get to do this, so
Yeah, I personally
really
love it when there's absolutely nothing happening on screen. We're just talking about units for sure. Definitely a highlight for me. Not even completely sarcastic, by the way. Like, I know it's not super exciting to look at, but I do enjoy going back and forth on units and the way we've used them in the past, the way we expect to be able to use them in the future, getting new ideas for how to perform with them. I think that's most interesting with the part 3 and before units, because there you have time to do things with them, whereas these units are mostly low resource units that just perform things mostly the same from playthrough to playthrough. But I do know there are some things that we have done differently in the past, even with these units, so I'm curious what those are.
Oh yeah.
So we are going to first do the unit that we forgot, which is Raisin, and then we'll move on to the units that join in part 4. I'm trying to find Raisin right now. There he is. So he's over here. Got some stat screens. Take a moment to marvel at them. I'm sorry, Raisins, that you can't see them, but maybe in the final video you'll be able to take a look, because they are gorgeous.
All good.
I really like Raisin. I think I made it obvious in the 20-second review I did in editing last time. But I love the type of dancer that just refreshes 4 people. I think it's busted, but in the fun way, where you spend your turn basically figuring out a nice diamond to put him in the middle of and then use him. And the cool thing about Raisin is that, first off, he's available for a whole lot, but also in order to do the 4-way dance, you have to find a way to sacrifice some dances to get more out of it later. So you need to use a Living Grass to like just huff grass for 2 turns, or you can grass for 1 turn and then wait a couple turns and then he just transforms naturally. And that way you get like 1 turn of no dancing, and then a couple turns of dancing normally, then a lot of turns of dancing 4-way. Or you can transform instantly with a Lagustone, which is limited, but that's the best value for Lagustone, I find, is just being able to Vigor 4 people. Or you just don't grass him and you just dance every turn until like turn, what is it, like 3, 4, 5, he transforms naturally that way. That's also perfectly viable, but I enjoy transforming him as much as possible because 4-way dances are just so good. Especially in a game where units can canter after a lot of things, and you have a lot of good units with canter. You got Har, you got the Hawks, you got Titania. You might have trained someone else with canter that's not as good but still viable, like Oscar or Tanith, or in part 4 you can bring all sorts of units alongside them, and that makes him super flexible, super useful. I don't think I have to go into detail on like why exactly dancing is useful, because I've said that many times, but one thing I will highlight is that I think Raisin helps other Lagoos be a lot better, because they often have actions they don't really care where they take place, as long as they're able to just go somewhere and use grass. So even someone like Ranulf can really make great use of Raisin, but also the Hawks, like I mentioned before, become a lot better when Raisin is present. So I think Raisin, even though he's obviously busted and he enables other busted units to even more busted than they already are, is super interesting in his own way, and I really enjoy using him. I don't think he's the best Heron for the tower, but before that, he is one of my favorite ones to use, for me at least. What about you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, like the 4-way dance, sure, it takes a stone to set up, but on chapters where it's worth, right? So, and again, here's the thing, right? Like even if you never do it, you're never ambitious and use like a Lagustone to transform and do some massive like turn 2 or turn 3 or turn 4 play. You're still getting a dancer, right? He still has really high move. You're still getting a dancer, and he's still got like pretty decent bulk, frankly. So like, nothing's really going wrong with this guy too. I do like how when he's transformed, he has just like completely massive move. I mean, this guy, how much move does he have when transforms? I think it goes to like, does it go to 8 or 9?
I want to say it's, yeah, I would have guessed 8 or 9 too. I actually don't know. I can't really transform him into preps, unfortunately, but
yeah, no, it's huge. It's mad. Like I know Raphael is always like perpetually capped to 5 move. Leanne is like always capped to 5 or
it's 8.
6 move.
I looked it up.
Okay, it's 8. Yeah, which is just, I mean that's huge, right? So I do agree that in the tower, when like you actually have a choice of dancer, right, that Raphael is usually better, but that's more the nature of the tower maps kind of really benefiting the 4-way dance on turn 1 more than anything else, rather than Raisin being weak. I think that Raisin is totally appropriate to all the maps you can bring him to. I think that he's, such a very easy deployment on all those maps. It helps you, like, whether you're just trying to train someone up by funneling tons of EXP or strike rank into them, or whether you're trying to get out of the map really quickly, Raisin's going to help you with like any kind of goal that you have. Right?
Yeah.
Like, he's just, you know, the second action on your favorite unit, the unit you're trying to train, or the unit who's doing the most work, is just like, there's no way to replicate it. So he's absolutely amazing unit. I remember, I think it was some time back, I was saying these outrageous things like Raisin can survive the silver bow attack. Yeah, it was totally wrong.
He's good, but maybe not that good.
Yeah, maybe not that good. Steel bow for sure, right? But I don't know. I remember looking up, there's some like crazy outrageous thing that he was able to survive because he's so bulky, but I really can't remember it. One other thing I will mention is that Raisin joins at, like, he joins above level 15, I know, so he has access to the Bliss Golder, just outright immediately. This is a Golder that sets your biorhythm to max, like it puts you to the apex of your biorhythm curve, right? So, and I think that there are a few uses for this if you're willing to look ahead. Remember that like biorhythm's progression is completely like predictable, right? It just goes forward one each turn, and then I think it goes forward like one at the end of a map. So if you're able to really look ahead, and there are a lot of times when you can use a Bliss to get ahead. There are times when you can use it to say set up a low biorhythm for 313. There are times you can use it to set up a high biorhythm for 4E2 if you want. Of course, other herons have access to this as well, but Raisin's the only one who can do it without any kind of like Vex or long-term grinding.
Yeah, I think the biorhythm and the other Golders they have access to, I barely remember them because 99% of the time you're just dancing. It's better than anything else you can do, right? But it allows you to do some funny things. I remember there was a guy, Leopold Stutch, like a really old Fire Emblem YouTuber who's no longer active, but he had some really funny videos. And some of them involved the Herons doing these outrageous weird Galder setups just to make sure that his super unlikely strategies would work or something like that. I don't even remember, but I do remember him using these kinds of shenanigans to, you know, pull off funny stunts for YouTube views, basically, and that was really enjoyable. And
yeah, swing the odds in the favor.
Yeah, and I do know that biorhythm manipulation is a pretty big part of both speedruns and LTCs use it. I don't remember if they ever use Blessing in the LTC, but I do know that in the speedrun it actually is used to get Ike to max biorhythm from the last map, which is quite pleasurable.
Yeah, I think that it's crazy. There's some like, I think there's a dance they do in like 3-10 or 3-11.
Yeah.
There's a Bliss that they do, and it literally sets up like everyone's biorhythm for the entire rest of the game, basically. Like Ike's biorhythm gets totally sorted, Tanith's biorhythm gets totally sorted for like the entire rest of the game. It's really crazy.
Is it? Is it 4-way Bliss?
I think so.
That's funny.
But like whatever it looks like, it's kind of crazy that they do it in 3-11, and it literally sets it up for the entire rest of the game. Yeah. Right? Like, it's kind of crazy.
It's great. Super niche though, I gotta say. This is obviously like a 1% of the time kind of thing, but if you plan it out, it can definitely work. Shall we move on? Because we do have a fair amount of units to discuss. I don't know how long they're going to take. Probably less long than most units, but Raisin is a part 3 unit, so he's kind of different. First one I would like to take a look at, and we'll just mostly go by recruitment order, is Sanaki. And before we get into Sanaki specifically, these are going to be a couple units that join in part 4 that are around before you get to the tower, where you have to only pick 10 units. So no matter what, these are units that are nearly guaranteed to be able to make some kind of positive impact to your team, which is a big plus for me always. We just don't have to invest, and you have a large demand for units because you're split across 3 armies, and you have a lot of enemies to route, and routing is the toughest objective to do with a low number of units. So having some extra help there is always really appreciated. You have another group of units that we'll discuss later that generally join either right before part 4 pre-endgame ends, or actually in the tower. Those don't have that advantage. They generally take up a slot in the tower, so their contributions are going to be measured a little bit differently. They're probably going to be more emphasis on the actual endgame. Whereas the endgame performance of the units here is usually not the best. There's some couple good ones in there though. Sanaki is nice because she's free all the way through. She's even forced into the tower, so no matter how bad she might be, if she can even do like one little chip damage somewhere, she's a positive. She has no real opportunity cost. But she's set up a bit more, she's less set up like a pre-promote like that, and more set up like an Est kind of mage almost, because her growths are very Lina-like, I would say. She has like massive magic growth and then not a whole lot of speed or bulk to go around. That makes her scary to use, especially in Iron Man runs or a run like this, where a death isn't just, oh, I have to load a save state, or I have to just, whatever, I'll just go back to the start of the map. There's an actual punishment for it, which is a game over. Your run just ends if you're doing like a harsh Iron Man. And with Sanaki, especially with her super low bulk and even a possibility of getting doubled, it's very scary. I remember there was several times during 4 Prologue and 4-3, the 2 chapters that she's forced onto, where it's like, well, I want to do this, but I don't know if A, I have to bulk to survive, and B, I have the speed to not get doubled. And remember, I put Resolve on her. I don't know if it's still on her. But it was so scary to use because I was like, well, I want to activate Resolve, but I kind of don't want to do Sanaki combat because what if she dies? That's like the big thing about ignorance, is these kind of things cannot be predicted unless you know the enemy stats really well, which I know them sort of, but not that well. That said, Sanaki is very, very fun to use and very satisfying. She has great animations with Simoleon especially, where it's just like she just summons the sun and just roasts someone in one hit. And generally, if you have like an enemy nearby that's like broken away from the pack and trying to get into your camp and you need to like just 2-shot them, Sanaki generally doesn't 1-shot, but she can combine with someone else, like, I don't know, Scrimir, or maybe even the Lucci, or some other scrub you brought onto the map for this purpose. And she'll do fine at just getting rid of like one enemy. It gets scary when there's multiple because no matter how good Sanaki is, she could never kill more than one enemy at a time. And that's when she gets into trouble, and you have to really consider just retreating instead. But for those kind of purposes, it's really nice. And it's also nice that all the free units you get for the Mekkah army, including Sanaki, can have full movement in the sand of 4-3. So that's another nice bonus to her. So scary to use, but massive chip damage and really fun to activate. What about you? What have you done with Sanaki?
Yeah, no, you've basically summed it up, right? Like, obviously, it's kind of some work to keep her protected. I find that her speed, if she's holding the Cymbeline, which is like a little bit lighter than the other tomes, is usually like pretty adequate most of the time. Like, I think, you know, the boss of her join map and like a couple of the sword masters in the desert will definitely one-rounder, but like everyone else is kind of like they either got a 1-shot, which is also still possible, or they actually can't really do it, right? But yeah, Cymbeline is lighter. Bolganon's a bit heavy, but everything else is pretty good.
Oh, I think I got a strength level up at some point, probably. I suspect I might have.
You did, but hey, that's another benefit, is that when she levels up, she can sometimes get 2 AS, right?
So, yeah, sure.
There you go. The whole being weighed down thing again. So I understand there's some people who like deride her speed for like, you know, not really being able to double, but then, you know, I see sometimes like you go up with Sanaki and she deals like 35 damage in one hit. They're like, oh, she doesn't double. And then they grab like Sigrun, who does 11 times 2, and they're like, much better. Like, hold on, dude, come on, like, what's really going on here? Just hit them really hard with Sanaki. It's
well,
totally
I will say, if Sanaki is not doubling, but Sigrun is, and Sigrun is tier 3, she has 2 chances to stun or crit an enemy.
I guess you got a point there, right? So that is still much better. We briefly tried to do this resolve Nosferatu Sanaki thing, right? And I think it's a strategy that requires like very specific benchmarking and actually like a lot of investment. Like I think I remember back when I was benchmarking trying to do it, she needs like 2 robes and 3 spirit dusts in order to pull it off like really consistently in desert. So we tried it, but we didn't like really put enough investment into her in order to activate the strat. When you do it, I think she just like eats up the entire desert by herself, and it's like really comical. Not even close, but
does she have the avoid to like not die randomly?
Well, she Nosferatu's it back, right? And that's the point of the 2 robes.
I see.
So she just gets it all back. Yeah, no, I mean, I really like her. She hits very hard. She has access to the Meteor and the Purge tomes that we have in the inventory right now, right? Because she can use light magic too. Mm-hmm. As a training project type unit, I'm not really too keen on her. I mean, I guess you can give her Paragon, but I think like no matter what, she's still gonna have these qualities of like, you know, she dies to most direct attacks and just deals a lot of damage on her outgoing combat. So like even if you train her, I don't think that really changes about her fundamentally.
No, you probably still need something like Resolve or Nosferatu to keep her safe. I do think the tower slot makes her a lot more appealing in that way, because you can still bring other units, whereas if you train project someone else that has similar qualities about them, they would still take up a slot a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And it also probably slightly helps that she's a little safer in 4E sometimes than her stat would suggest, because she gets a special, I think it's like a +10 or +20 defense item in 4E5 that keeps her a little safe. And there's also certain enemies that don't attack her. I want to say it's the enemies from 4E4 onwards. I think the 4E3 she still gets attacked. I'm trying to be vague for spoilery reasons. Do you remember if the 4E3 enemies attack her?
4E3 enemies do attack her for sure. It's only the 4E4 and beyond. Yeah.
So that helps a little bit, but yeah, she's still gonna have the same struggles mostly throughout, unless given a lot of resources. But you know, that's just mage girl life. A lot of people are willing to put up with it, and I can definitely see why, because it's definitely a fun unit to use. Okay, shall we move on to the next definitely not trading project unit, and that's Nasala.
Mm-hmm.
Holding Dragonfall for some reason.
Yeah.
I think it's because he picked it up in this is my 4E1 save. So Nasala is not a trading project. He is more of a pre-promote kind of unit, kind of more like a Goto than anything else. But a Goto that has some room to grow because he does not have the strength or the attack power to two-shot enemies. He does have to speed to double everything ever. Like, I can't think of a single enemy he would not double with 22 base speed that gets doubled to 44. He might have a bit lower speed than that at base. I don't remember exactly, but I do know he's like super fast, and he has a decent enough speed growth, higher strength growth than Tibarn. Fun fact, is much lower base, and crucially, he doesn't join with double S strike. He joins with single S, which means I think 5 or 8 less might. Do you remember?
Yeah, it's 5 less might.
Yeah, so that can be that can be a big difference maker. I know from the top of my head. I thought it was just like Wyverns he was missing out on, but then we played 4-3, and I was like, wait, he misses out on like everything without double S strike. He has so much trouble two-shotting. So you might actually have to give this go-to-like unit a resource like Adept to increase his chances of one-running things. Either that or just hope he activates Tear or just take an extra turn to kill things. But he's still really durable because he just dodges just about everything. His HP pool is massive, and when he transforms, he's going to have 28 defense, for example, this one. So he can survive and kill things just fine. He's the main weakness of Laguz is just they have no true range. And in Nasala's case, he's very vulnerable to, say, crossbows. Fortunately, crossbows are very rare in the chapters that Nasala is in. There's like 1 crossbow warrior in 4 prologue, and there's that group of 4 crossbow warriors in the desert that just moves like 1 or 2 tiles a turn. You can easily just avoid with him. But it's something you have to be wary of. Don't put him in range of them because I think he gets 1 FKO'd, if I'm not completely mistaken. I don't remember what level crossbows they have, but it can definitely be, even if he doesn't get 1 FKO'd, he can still die to something else. So you have to be very careful with him if those are around. But everything else, he survives just fine. I think it takes like 3 or 4 hits to die, and that's if they hit him with his, massive avoid. Very good unit. If you can get him to double S, then he's definitely just good to bring into the tower. Doubling things without any investment is a massive boon, especially in the last chapter. It's just super nice to have. You can use parity there. Again, I'm trying to be super vague because, I don't want to spoil anyone who hasn't seen the finale, but it's very helpful to have parity on him in the last map. And he's just a really good royal all around. He has Cantor to move around a bit more flexibly than someone like Nyla or Kanigas or Gifka, who we'll get into. So those are some pros he has. But overall, I would not say he's the best royal, but just the stats he has as a royal are so good that it doesn't even matter. Like, I forgot to mention this, but Form Shift allows him to just ignore the Laguz gauge mechanics, and that's just a super nice boon in general. Yeah, super good. Great unit, right?
Oh yeah. Between the form shift and the move, it's like, yeah, sure, we have this downside, so to speak, of like only S rank strike and not double S strike. But the thing is, he's so good and he's so mobile and he's so fast and he's so bulky and he has so much damage otherwise that like it doesn't really feel like you're doing a training project when you're trying to get him to double S strike, right? You're just using him, right? Like you just deploy him on 4P and you just deploy him on 4-3 and you just kind of like kill enemies with him and it's totally fine. So I do think that he's one of the more important units on both of those maps, right? Like even though there are some enemies where he misses out on the 1 rounding threshold, like he can still like just take an extra action to kill them if he needs to, or just use a player phase into enemy phase action if he needs to. And all these are totally fine. Also, he can proc Tear. Also, he can proc Adept, as you said. I feel like the Adept, I usually like to move to other armies because I think usually like the jobs I allocate to Nasala, he just kind of has, and he's totally fine. So I do think, like, as you mentioned, the Royals, there's not really that many differences between them, although the fact that Nasala always doubles, yeah, that's pretty nice. But pretty much the only trick to him is, like, you really do have to grind up the double S strike rank. Even though I paint it like, it's not a big deal grinding up the double S strike rank, like, if you fail to do it, he does end up being, like, pretty significantly worse than the other Royals, like, even when he gets to tower. So, like, do make sure you grind it up in his first couple maps.
Yeah, and like I used Nasala pretty actively, and this is what I end up with, like nearly double S, but not quite there. And you really want it as soon as you possibly can, especially because the first map in the tower is the most intensive one where you want this combat the most. Everything else you can almost entirely not use Nasala if you really don't want to, even if he's one of the few units you have. So the strike rank is super important, but it doesn't hamper his utility as a free unit in the very least. It just makes him a lot better if he does get it, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's really all there's to Nasala, I reckon. So shall we move on to Skrimir, our last desert guy? I put him here, I think. So Skrimir is a lion, the first lion you get, which means he's not quite a royal, but he does have so much gauge that once you transform him with like a stone, that he joins with one, so you'll always have one available if you're willing to spare him that one. And then once he's transformed, he generally just doesn't untransform until it takes like a really long time, like several more combats than someone like the Hawks or Volke or especially the Cats. Like he's basically a much better version of Cats in that way. He's massive strength, but also massive speed issues. I'm kind of annoyed by how little Skrimir doubles, especially in 4-3. I think in 4 Prologue, there's like a shot at doubling some paladins, but generally, if you have someone like Sanaki failing to kill things, I generally just have her and Skrimir team up on things. That's the way things kind of tend to go. But if you can get Skrimir to double somehow, like if you can somehow spare him a Speed Wing, or you can activate Resolve through like untransformed shenanigans, then he starts being really valuable because, you know, one running is pretty good. And like I said, all these units that you get in for Prologue can all just ignore the desert terrain. Skrimir does have to be transformed for that to happen. If he's untransformed, he still has like 2 or 3 move, but I think when you transform him, he moves full move. Am I right? Is he like, does he impede? Is he impeded by the desert? He is, right? When he's like untransformed.
Yeah, everything you said is correct.
Okay, good. I was just worried for a second there. But yeah, when he transforms, I mean, you can see right here, he would have 38 strength. It's not his base, because this is my my end game save. But, you know, his attack power is ridiculous. His bulk is insane. His HP pool is massive. He has plenty of room for skills if you want to give him some, because 65 capacity minus 5 for shove is still quite a lot. Yeah, nice unit. I just wish he doubled. That's really all there's to Skrimir. I would never bring him to the tower unless I'm playing like 0% no royals, because you do have several units that are just infinitely better than him. And I'm not just talking about the other royals, but like most Bjork will probably be more useful too if you've trained him up to this point. But he's a good filler for the pre-tower, I think, right?
Yeah, like most Bjork, like Janaf Volke, I think. I do think, because he kind of mentioned his speed and that you can give him a speed wing. This is one of these units. There's like a few units in the game that are just like hugely, massively improved by a speed wing, and Skrimir is one of them. And like, because he goes from 26 AS, which doubles practically nothing, to 30 AS, which doubles pretty much everything, right? And, you know, I understand there's kind of some apprehension about, oh, I'm investing in a unit who's only in
2 maps, yeah.
Yeah, like 2 maps and then tower. But, I mean, in my opinion, like, the first 6 maps of Part 4 are, like, kind of hard, right? Like, or if they're not hard, they're at least, like, worth investing resources into. Because, you know, the difference between bringing good units to those maps and, like, completing all the objectives and completing all the side objectives versus bringing bad units and, like, turtling against 1 million reinforcements for 1 million turns, it's so tremendous, the difference between it, right? So, I do think, like, planning for your Part 4 and even being open-minded to investing in these units can really help. And something like Speedwing on Skrimir just really activates this unit who can, like, totally take out just everything. Another way to get his speed up is to proc his Resolve. Unfortunately, like, when he's transformed, getting him low enough to even be in Resolve range in the first place is, like, such an ordeal that most of the time when I see, like, strats that set up a Skrimir Resolve, I see them, like, have Skrimir get attacked a bunch on turn 1 enemy phase, and then on turn 2 he transforms and starts, you know, doing his Resolve Lagoose thing, right?
Yeah.
That's usually what I see with Skrimir, and I think that's another good way to just go ahead and get him doubling. And if you manage either of those, then, you know, it's super good, and now you have this unit. And I personally think it's worth doing at least one of those 2 things. Like, I understand that there's only, like, 3 Speed Wings in the game and 2 Resolves by the time that you have them, but I do think that activating this unit who goes from, you know, just doing nothing to having full move and one-running everybody and never dying is actually just, like, totally worth it all the time.
Yeah, I think I would lean much towards Resolve, first of all, because it's not a super contested resource for someone who's just casually playing, I think. Because personally, I'm very apprehensive about using Resolve in the first place, because if a unit like Nephany or Mia or Zhark is using it, it usually means they're kind of close to dying, and if I know they don't reach 0% chance to get hit, I don't really want to use Resolve in the first place. Like, I guess I could accept, like, sub 10% hit rates, but usually it's kind of scary. But for Skrimir, when he's at half health, that would be about 30-something health, but also 32 defense and really reasonable Resolve speed. So he would still dodge most of the time, and he can tank most hits still. So that would be, as long as he's away from mages, probably fine. The Speed Wing, like I said, it really is only 2 maps that you give him a wing for, right? So, like, assuming you don't bring him to the tower, that is 2 maps. Whereas I can activate Skirmir, and I agree there's a heavier weight on part 4, but at the same time, okay, let's say we assume the part 3, the latest speed wing can get, right, the 3.9 speed wing that you can get back in like 3.11 or so, for the Grillmercs. That's like, you can also use it for, so like 3.11, 3.13, 3E, and then you also have it potentially for those part 4 maps as well. Like, you're not erasing it from part 4 by using it on the Grillmerc, right? So if you have someone like Boyd doubling instead, I don't know, that feels better to me, right?
I mean, I guess, like, it does depend on how much you value these maps. I personally, every time I do a planned playthrough of Radiant Dawn, like, the maps, especially like 4.3 and 4.4, end up, like, really sticking out as being maps that just, like, require really good resource allocation in order to, like, beat consistently or beat well, right? And I understand that this is usually kind of, like, maybe coming from, like, an LTC or speedrunner draft race mindset where I, like, have a way that I'm measuring how good I'm doing in the chapters. And if you're just playing casually, then yeah, I can perhaps understanding putting it on like a different training project unit or one who can be around longer. But I guess for me and my style is like, hey, what are going to be the really hard maps in the game? It's always 4.3 and it's always 4.4 that show up. Like, basically the entire story of part 3 is I'm just preparing for those 2 maps. Frankly, it's kind of like, it's kind of silly how much you have to do in order to really like be ready for them. So in that case, I do think like, yeah, it depends on how much you fear the part 4 maps. If you show up to Desert and you have like massive Har and massive Jill and like massive Sigrun, then yeah, absolutely don't even think about doing Speedwing Skirmer because you already have this chapter solved, right? Why would you solve a chapter that you've completely solved already? But I think if you're, going, you're trying to cut corners, then, and you're really looking for like the most efficient place to put a Speedwing, like putting it on Skirmir and getting yourself a unit activated, I think is a really beneficial thing to do.
Yeah, I do agree that the part 4 maps have should be very heavily considered in a playthrough. I just look back on my own playthrough and I'm thinking, wow, there were so many points where I wish that Boyd and Gatry would double, where I know they were kind of like within speedwing range probably of doing it, and like I really didn't have a speedwing to spare for Screaming. I had like -5 speedwings in my game if you look at how many units required it, how many units wanted it. That's why I'm a little bit apprehensive, but I do agree you get good value for these 2 maps. I just think there's a lot of units that want speed wings as well, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I do know our most recent run through. I think we were like going through the tower team. We're like, yeah, this guy's low speed. Oh, and this guy is low speed.
Yeah.
Oh, and this guy's low speed too. It's like our whole team is really slow.
Yeah, I do wish I did the resolve thing though, because that would have been neat. Anyway, let me cut this debate short here that I incited myself because we have a couple more units to talk about. Let's do Tabar next, because no one new joins an Ike's route really. It's just units you've had before.
Yeah, it's like a Raphael and Nyla, right?
Yeah, we did discuss those already. So Tabarn is here. He has growth rates too. I mean, Tabarn is basically Nasala plus, but he's in his own little route where you're usually not sending your best comp units. At least I'm not sending my best comp units there because I know Tabarn is there and because he has the leadership stars to make sure that my other units that I am bringing are much better off. So 4 leadership stars, that's I think like plus 20 hit avoid on everyone on your army, right?
Yep. Yeah, everybody.
That's super sickening. And then Tabarn himself can just kill everything to death very, very quickly because just like Nasala, he doubles everything. But unlike Nasala, he has double S strike rank at base and a little bit more strength at base to boot. And only 5% worse strength growth, as if that's significant, because I think he gets like single-digit XP from enemies anyway. But despite the fact that he gets, despite the fact that he gets low XP from everything, it's so worth killing half the map with him because it speeds up everything. And like you said earlier, Raisins, the part 4 maps, you don't want to lengthen them too much unless you're just really trying to squeeze every drop of XP out of a map. You just want them to be over with at some point. Stop the reinforcements, stop the maps from keeping going. And Tabarn is one of the best units in the game for doing that. And you can't put him in any other routes, but I don't think you would even want to. He's just so strong. Great tower candidate too, for the same reasons as Nasala. The speed in combination with parity or even Nihil can really do work for him. And even before the last map in the game, he just kind of kills everything. There's like generals in 4E1 that he probably doesn't 2-shot, but I do know he can, I think in normal mode, if he hits like enough strength procs, he can even 2-hit Kyotos. So that's just the sign of like how absurdly strong Tabarn is. He's also so mobile. Like he has 8 move untransformed. I think when he transforms, he has the highest move in the entire game. And the skill capacity
like 10.
Yeah, and the skill capacity to just take any 2 skills you want. It's only 2 skills. He has like more capacity than he has skill slots, which is so stupid. You can give him like you can give him like stillness and whatever super expensive skill you could think of, and he still wouldn't be able to fill his capacity meter to the full because he just has all these other skills. But it's really all about form shift and the fact that he doesn't need to care about the gauge. He can just attack something every turn or heal if he really has to. The only thing he fears are a couple crossbows, but again, they're easily avoided, very rare. You just need to know where they are, recognize their map sprite if we're playing ignorant mode like we are, and you should be good to go. And he wrecks everything. He is so good and so satisfying and fun to use, right?
Oh yeah. Like you can do that, or you can just like attack the crossbow anyway and just Pavis it, right? Because he also has this. It's like it's so silly how good he is. Someone's like, "Oh, he's one of the best units in the game." I wouldn't even argue with him. It's like, yeah, honestly, you're kind of right. Like, as far as the Royals go, a lot of them are pretty similar. But like T-Barn not only shows up early, he also has the best move, and unlike Nasala, who has pretty similar move, he doesn't need to be trained at all. Like these stats are just totally fine for the entire game, from the moment he joins until like the moment you hit the credits screen. His base stats are like totally more than enough to do literally anything that you could possibly want, and he has such massive moves to go along with it. This guy's he's so insane. I would probably put him as like the best Royal, like quite easily. I guess there's some things that other Royals can do that he can't do, but like, come on, man, he's so good for so much more. And like, there's really not a whole lot to say about him, I gotta say. I do think that, so for his two skills, Pavis and Savior, I do think Savior's like a little bit wasted on him, because I kind of like using Savior to like, carry a unit to do the whole like Savior support
use
strats,
pair up, right? Yeah,
pair up, exactly. And like T-Barn doesn't, first off, he can't like have supports, right? Like I guess he could technically have a C support on like 4-5, but that's so... Like, come on, dude.
What if you put someone next to him when he's an NPC? Hey.
I'm pretty sure you don't build support, but that's a funny thought, actually. I'm going to have to try it now. But, yeah, no, we can see it. But it's like, I think Savior is definitely just better used on literally anybody else.
I agree.
And so it's like, best to just take this off and do the whole pair-up thing, I think. Pavis is like, I don't know, it blocks a crossbow. It's kind of funny. It's a proc skill, and I think on anyone else I'd be, saying like, oh, it's a proc skill, you shouldn't rely on it. But on T-Barn, it's like, it's kind of funny. Like, just use it.
Yeah, I think it's also like slightly too much capacity for anyone else to care about using, and it's kind of like Soul, where you don't really want to rely on it anyway, so it's just funny to keep it on T-Barn. Honestly, T-Barn is so good, he doesn't really... As good as he is, he doesn't have a real way to improve. Like, no skill is going to give him the ability to attack at 2 range, so what else do you even want him to have? Right? Like, you can give him Adept to kill generals in 1 round. I guess it's like all I can think of, really. But Pavis blocks a crossbow sometimes. That's all I can think of. Savior is definitely worse on him, though. Definitely don't like it. I will say, I personally, I think Nyla is the best Royal, but that's just because she's available before Part 4, and that's really it. That's arguably
a good point.
Arguably also because her role in Ike's army is like slightly more coveted than T-Barn's army, because T-Barn has one map that's not super difficult. It's like the only non-route map that I think makes him slightly worse, but I would put them near each other for sure, and I wouldn't really contest anyone saying T-Barn is the best Royal, but like, oh, you're completely wrong. It's more like, I kind of disagree on the technicality, but I do see why.
Yeah.
Because T-Barn does have a lot of things over Nyla when they're both around, for sure. Anyway, Palius next, I think.
Let's get Palius.
Palius.
I don't know. I just call him Palius because I don't like him.
I've never cared about Fireman pronunciation. Not about to start. Palius, really fun unit. I didn't use him in my last playthrough because I used him in my last playthrough, so I didn't use him in this one. I gave him Beast Foe for 4/5, and that's about it. It was funny to see him miss enemies that he probably would O-code. But he's the only dark magic unit you really have in this game, with like one technical exception. But really, he's the only one you have for most of the game, and that makes him special. You get like all kind of fun tome animations, but he isn't. Kind of like Sanaki, a very fragile mage in a game where mages tend to be underwhelming because they lack speed. Enemies have more res than they usually have, and they lack movements, they lack bulk, and they just tend to not one-round stuff or survive. That's their main thing. That's what Fire Emblem is all about when it comes to combat, and that and mobility, and none of those things are good for Palius. So it doesn't have much in his favor in that way. He's just a fun training project unit that you can use if you want to. I really wish that he joins during the preparations in the chapter he joins, but instead he joins like turn 2 or 3 or something on 4-2. And that means you can't give him resources in advance. You can't give him skills like Paragon. You can't crown him early if you wanted to. You can't do anything else like give him bonus experience to get him started. He just joins with, I mean, not what you see here. It's a little lower because this is the extent that I used him in 4.5, but he just can't do a whole lot because of it. And then in 4.5, you do have the opportunity to grind him up if you really wanted to. You can make him great, and I've done that. It's great. You get Balbrith as well from Izuka, the S rank or the double S Dark Tome, and again, he's the only one you can use it in the game until the technicality joins, and that's fun. The animation is great. It does a lot of damage. It probably won't double a whole lot, but it's fun. It's nice, but I wouldn't call him a good unit. He's just kind of there. He's not even the best staff user for endgame that you can deploy. There's several better ones available if you wanted to. Micaiah's there for free. Lindsay has more mobility. You might have trained Soren in staff rank beforehand. So you have all kinds of better options for that too. If you want to use Palius, I would just go all out, train him, make him great, but I wouldn't say he is great by himself. It's the work you put into him that makes him so. And that's satisfying, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for like a low resource kind of unit, right?
Yeah, I don't really think he makes good use of any. I mean, he like uses these Fenrir siege tomes better than anyone else, I guess. Like, that's kind of cool. But yeah, like the work required to get him there and like for what reward you get is not really that impressive. I don't even know if it's possible to make like a forged dark tome, is it even? So like your options are always going to be like kind of crappy. Actually, is there one?
I don't know. I'm gonna check actually.
Oh, may as well.
Nope. No, can't forge his things.
Can't be done.
You can make forged thunders. That's it. Yeah.
Oh, I guess the Forged Thunder. Okay, you know what? I take back. The Forged Thunder is like kind of cool. But even now, it's like you kind of like I kind of joke about how the Forged Tomes are just outright better than all the other ones. But like, you know, once you get stuff like Thoron and Bolganon, then like okay, maybe not so much anymore. But yeah, hold on, we've lost him.
I can't find my Pelias.
There he is. Okay, found him. Yeah, no. yeah. Where'd he go? I've never really used him. I don't really like him a whole lot. I do know that when you Master Crown him, he gets like a suspiciously high staff rank. But even then, it's like, okay, when are you gonna do that? Like 4-5? Why not just use Bastion? Like he does that same thing, and does like kind of just as well.
Yeah.
So
and Master Crowns are not like a low competing resources. Like we were starving for those in Part 3.
Yeah, it's like kind of crazy. I think like if you're using Palias, the joy of him is the training, right? Like it's not like you're suffering through this training arc in order to get this massive reward unit later. It's like you're doing it because you enjoy seeing EXP go up, right? So like that's definitely this kind of unit. He starts out at like a pretty low level, and so he gets a decent amount of EXP and has a lot of room to grow, right? So I don't know. Enjoy your time using Pelias. He's fun to train up, but I've never really seen the reward of using him super long or taking him to endgame. I should mention, by the way, if you have a copy of Radiant Dawn and you have not beaten the game yet, you will not get this unit.
Oh yeah, and then
so this is a second playthrough only unit. I should go ahead and just mention that.
Yeah, you should. When you clear the game, there will be like a thing that says like cleared file 1, I think, and then you're on a file that has actually cleared the game.
Yeah, okay. So just another small thing about Palias, but that's it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. You also have to make the choice not to murder him in 313 because in the dialogue, because otherwise he's also very understandably not around. All right, shall we move on to Bastion? Because he's next, I think.
Yeah, I think it's either Bastion or we could do Stefan Oliver.
Yeah, I was gonna do Bastion and Volke first because they are around before endgame, whereas I feel like Stefan and Oliver really aren't because of the context of the maps. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
Yeah. So we'll get started with Bastion, then we'll do Volke, and then we'll go into Stefan and Oliver, and then we'll do the endgame squad. So Bastion doesn't have... Like, he's definitely around less than these other units we've mentioned so far, because he joins in the second chapter of Part 4 for Tabarn's army. But he does have some good utility at base. I'm not showing it off here very well, but he can use Meteor, which means he has a 3-10 range attack that just kills any Beast Lagoons in 4-5, I believe, at base. And he also just use any other type of magic, so he can be effective against the cats and the tigers with Elfire, against the flyers with Arcwind, or the dragons even with Elf Thunder, or anything else you can find him using, because his weapon ranks in those regards are pretty good. He even joins with double S Wind, which I did not know, which that just means he can use Excalibur at base for some reason. That's pretty handy. And then he uses stabs as well, so you can use like Physic, Hammer, and Rescue, any kind of healing if you want to. So all those are just pretty nice at base. Most people are probably not going to bring Bastion to endgame just because the slots are so tight. But if you're looking for like a filler that just kind of does things like that, he's far from the worst you can bring. He's probably one of the best ones you can bring if you haven't raised anyone specifically for that purpose. So that's pretty good. That's about where it ends though. I've never actually brought him to endgame. I don't think he's particularly great if you do have other alternatives. And even within 4-5, I don't tend to use him all that much, just because I know I'm not bringing him, so I'm not super likely to invest into him. But I think he's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. He's just never around, like most of these units, and he just doesn't do anything spectacular other than stage utility, basically. But I do kind of like him. I just never really gave him much time. What about you?
Yeah, so I do think that like Bastion, and this is kind of more of a blanket statement about, you know, the units whom we're about to discuss right now, is that, you know, yeah, they're around for the tower, basically, and they're around for like the last turn of, you know, some map in part 4. And the issue with them is that if you have been training a unit like them, or really any, you know, kind of Bjork combat unit before, then you're probably going to have a unit who's better than Bastion, right? Or a unit who's better than Volke or Stefan or Oliver or all these other people, or Renning, or all these other people we're bringing up. And like, what will determine how you think about Bastion, or how you think about Stefan, or how you think about any of these units is probably like, what's going to determine how you feel about these units is how do you feel about that statement earlier? Like, if you've trained up a unit that does this, right? Because if you view that as like a cost or a liability to your team, then, you know, you might actually really like units like Bastion, or units like Stefan, or units like Renning, who are just like, if all you do is compare them to the enemy, like if all you do is compare Bastion to the enemy, he's got like really good performance. If all you do is compare, you know, any of these units to the enemy, they all do really well. It's just they're weaker than other options you can bring. Like when you compare them to the red units, they're great. When you compare them to the blue units, they're really not that great. And so, like Bastion, it's very likely that you'll just be able to field 10 units better than Bastion. But if you were really bad with your training, or if you were cutting corners, or if you're playing Iron Man and everyone died, then like you can just deploy him and he's totally fine, right? Like I think I've mentioned a ton of times, like on stream or on my own projects, when I was like, in part 4, literally everyone could die and I would still feel confident in tower because I have these amazing units, right? Like I would feel totally fine. So Bastion specifically, like now that kind of blanket statement about training other units is done, Bastion specifically, I feel as though he's kind of one of the weaker ones because, you know, hitting very hard with magic and not doubling isn't something that's like unique to him, especially. Like you've already got a couple units who are able to do that in Sanaki and perhaps Mekkah if you're using like the Thani against armors. So I'm not really like that impressed by his performance in that regard. And then the 24 speed is just like, I understand sometimes it sounds like we're just talking too much about speed, but man, 24 is just really not enough to do anything, to be honest with you. Like it can't even double dragons. I think it's like just totally pathetic.
Yeah, I looked at the armors in 4E1. Sorry to interrupt, just real quick for anyone for context. I looked at the armors in 21, in 4E1. They have around this much speed or a little more. Like he's closer to getting doubled by generals than he is to doubling them at pace.
Yeah, it's like it's so crap, right? And his staff rank, I guess, is cool. Like he has 17 range rescue, but how is he going to move forward to like have you cast the rescue? It's really not that good, to be honest. I'm not impressed with him. He's probably my least or my second least favorite among the 5 guys who we're about to bring up. The late game Bjork, essentially. Just because hard hitting magic damage, I've already got that. I guess if you have some strat that really needs 2 high damage siege tomes, then this guy's nice. But otherwise, you've got Sanaki for free, so just use her. I don't really see much issue with that kind of plan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's probably why I've never bothered bringing him, because his combat is really bad in endgame. It's really just in the context of 4-5 where it's any level of impressive, I think, because of all the effectiveness on Lagoose. What really hurts him besides the speed, I think, is that the tomes just have not a whole lot of might. Like Elfire only has 7. I just realized that. That's so trash. It's really you can use better tomes, to be fair, but they're not going to be powerful enough to offset the fact that he only attacks once. And 35 magic is decent, but it might not even be enough to cleanly 2-shot most of the enemies in 4E. Whoops.
Yeah, he is bulky, so you can't just kind of send him out there and get him attacked a couple times and he's totally fine. But whatever.
I don't know. I think he dies at 2 hits to generals, wouldn't he? He's only has 20 defense.
I meant to the Lagoose.
Oh yeah. No, the Lagoos are probably a bit weaker, especially the Flyers are very weak. He'll be fine there, but then again, you could use that or you could use a crossbow for that same purpose. So
yeah, no.
Even that is like you said, there's probably going to be someone else who can do it way better, whatever it is that he does. Okay, shall we look at Bastion's main contribution to the army next?
Yeah, this guy.
This guy. Let me get his growth on screen. Volke, I gotta say, I'm a fan. I was never super much into Volke. I kind of had him grouped in those units with, kind of with Bastion, honestly, where I was like, it's fine, I guess, but he's like never around, and when he is, he's not even the best because the Royals exist, and he's kind of there. But actually using him, I find him pretty satisfying. Not because I thought he would be like the ultimate bestest units ever or anything. He's had good unit fuel, I think is really what it is. He has a weapon type that late game you don't really have access to, a great user of weapons. I've said it numerous times, and I'll say it again. Volke, or Assault is absolute trash in late game Radiant Dawn, and I will not budge on this statement. But Volke just comes with the Peshkads, and you get the base lard as well. I think you get it in 4/4, you have to send it home for him to get it, which I think I forgot to do in this one. But even in just endgame, he's perfectly fine. He doesn't two-shot generals, but so often he's going to crit them with a plus 25 crit from the skill over here. And he has lethality, which is also, I think, either skill or skill divided by 2 chance to just delete something. That's usually enough to contribute. Even if he doesn't do it to all the enemies, if he does it to like 1 out of 3, he's totally fine. The innate stillness, I think, is interesting. I don't like it that much. We've discussed this before. I don't like it that much on him because I want Volke to fight things, and he's one of the better units at doing it. But I like giving that skill to someone else like Mekkah, who I don't want to fight things. And then, you know, he has the option to use it, I guess, for free if you never want to take it off. But I generally don't think it's a great pro to just not get attacked. I would like this unit to have an enemy phase, especially because his 2 range is decent. Peshkads provides 1/2 range, but then the base lord provides an upgrade to his might at the cost of 2 range countering. So you can really do both things, either killing a bunch of mages or a bunch of Lagoos, whatever situations calls for. And I don't know, I just think he's really good. He's not perfect. There are better units in endgame, but it's perfectly easy to find a situation where you want to use him. Like you're playing an Iron Man, or you just have a couple slots open that you don't know what to do with. You just bring Volke. He's going to be perfectly serviceable, and he's also just really enjoyable. At RNG-based results, no matter how unreliable they might be, are fun. It's just fun to see him unexpectedly delete someone. And I also just really like Volke's character from Radiant Dawn and Path of Radiance as well. So that's an extra plus for me. This is one of the units I've been most impressed with this playthrough for sure. But I understand that you already experienced in the ways of Volke, right?
Oh yeah, I'm glad I managed to convert you to the Church of Volke, as it were. I do say, like, I like the stillness, but I think you've convinced me to just like take it off of him and give it to anybody else, right? Like, I used to think this was super funny, but to be honest, like looking at these guys' stats, I mean, they're so crazy, right? 36 or 30. This is a level up. He got a strength speed, so it's really 35 speed, 30 strength. But like 35 speed, 30 strength, that's like so good. Yeah, I want enemies to attack them. You're totally right. Like, how did I not think of that before? Like, it's so silly. But yeah, no. As I was kind of mentioning earlier, there's a lot of other units where it's like, oh, you've probably trained up, you know, an X who's better than this guy. But I'm pretty dead certain you have not trained up a Whisper who's better than Volke. Like, there's no way you could possibly do that, right? He's just so insane. This crit plus 25, this lethality, like everything about him just screams like he's gonna kick butt and take names. It's really cool. So I don't know. I'm a huge fan of Volke. I understand, again, you only get him for tower, essentially, but
well, we did a lot with him in 4-5, right? If you played casually, I think he has more availability in that sense than someone like Oliver, I think, or Stefan even.
You've got a point, yeah. And I think Volke as well just like outright one rounds the boss of that map, which I know is like not really that hard, but the fact that he just joins and with his base inventory, not even his bases, his base inventory just does it, right? He's just like, all right, sure. Like goes up and hits him.
Yeah, you just have to pay him,
It's
he'll
like
do it, yeah.
Insane. Yeah, I guess, yeah, you do got to pay money for him, but he gives it all back, too.
Yeah.
That's another thing. If you recruit him, he gives you like, what, 50k or something outrageous? Like,
yeah,
it's such a huge amount.
You just need the starting investment and then you get it back, I think. I think that's how it works. It might be true that he gives it to you even if he's not around for your army, like if you didn't recruit him, but it's whatever. It's like 3k gold. Who cares, right?
Yeah, just buy him. He's so good.
Yeah, I think Bastion talks to him and he's like, I'll give you a personal discount. Why? Well, I don't like Izuka. I don't like this guy.
Yeah. I want to do this. Let me at him.
Yes. The goal is an excuse at this point. Okay, let's move on to a unit that's most like this, which is Stefan. I have to find him in the list real quick. He's probably around the desert people somewhere, as he usually is. We did get him, didn't we? There's no way I didn't.
Yeah, he's up on the top. There he is.
Yeah, there we go. With the Vacati, of course. Yeah, Stefan, like I said before, he is not as lucky as Volke because he joins in like a corner of the map, and by the time you make it to him, there's probably not a whole lot of 4-3 left, and that is always availability before the tower. So I mostly judge him by how well he does in the tower, which, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he is okay there, but after seeing Volke at work, I kind of think of him as a strictly worse Volke in that regard, because he has a couple of things that he just doesn't have, like exclusive weapon access to those knives. Like, you'll probably have someone able to use a sword there. That said, endgame does have a lot of swords that you might want to use and even bless, like the Vacati is one of them. The fact that you can use it at base is pretty great. You also might want to use a Worm Slayer, you might also want to use Alondite, and of course Ike himself as the Ragnell, but I guess it doesn't really count for anything. But, you know, there's reasons to bring more sword users than just a couple to the tower. So in that sense, he doesn't have a whole lot of competition. But if you have like a particularly good sword like the Vacati, there's probably someone else who can use it and wants to use it. So like if you've been training Zhark all game, or if you've been training Mia all game, or there's probably someone else I'm forgetting, they might also want that slot. And I think Stefan is like, sometimes I call him Stefan, by the way, because that's how I used to call him, but Raisins is converting me.
Yeah, no, I think it's just funny.
I've never tried using this guy against the generals, and I think that would really cement my opinion on how good he is, because I don't know what his performance is there. I have a feeling it's probably about Volks, if not a bit worse, and probably worse than any unit with a hammer, any unit that can use axes, any unit that has massive might like the Lagu. So that's why I'm a little more iffy on Stefan. But again, obviously, if you have a lot of people dead, or you just like him, he's fine to bring. I think I brought him in for my last Iron Man, and I thought he was okay, but I don't have like specific memories of him like absolutely kicking ass in 4E1. That's the main chapter where he can still contribute. So I don't have a lot of frame of reference here. I just don't like it. I like him about as much as I used to like Volk. Let me put it that way. What about you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of flip-flopped. Like, I used to really adore this guy. It's like, oh my goodness, this like late game sword master is just totally kicking butt. But I've kind of, you know, wisened up more to Volk as well, because like, so looking at, say, Stefan with the Vacati or Volk with the Basilard, Volk is like just strictly better in every parameter except speed, where he has 35 instead of 36. But like, come on, like seriously, dude, like who really cares about that one? So like, Stefan's combat, it is like pretty troublesome against the generals, which is like not really my favorite thing in the world, because it's kind of hard to, you know, really look at this guy who has only 6 maps in the game, and the first 2 of them are kind of like shaky, right? It's not exactly my favorite. Like, yeah, he's serviceable in the fact that like you can send him out and he'll be able to do combat and he won't die, and he'll kill like, you know, a quarter or a half of the generals that he fights or so. But I do feel like there's probably a better unit you can bring than Stefan. Like, I think I'd rather bring someone like Skrimir, to be honest, because like Skrimir, at least you could resolve him and get him like one-rounding generals or something. But Stefan, I mean, if his claim to fame is this one-range combat with the Vacati, then I'm really not a huge fan. I do really agree with your point, though, that there are so many really good swords to bless in tower that bringing spare sword users just to bless them, to bless the Vacati or bless the Alondite, is like super good in my opinion. Like, there are so many good sword users to bring that I think just bringing extra guys, like even doing stuff like trading the Vacati or trading the Alondite in late game maps when necessary, I think is going to be pretty helpful. So if you're into that sort of thing, by all means. But you know, if you work harder on your training projects, it's really not hard to get a guy who's better than Stefan.
Yeah, fair enough. That's about my assessment as well. All right, it's joke unit time, I think. Let me find my favorite joke unit. Here he is. It's Oliver. It's the guy who we thought was dead and who Ike asked, "Hey, can you please rejoin the enemy? Because I'm really not into this." He's not good. Like, sure, he still uses stabs. That's his main claim to fame. He has base rank A in stabs and an S in light. Neither of those things are super notable. We already kind of bashed Bastion for it being the only thing he can do is like have B stabs, and A stabs is not that much better. But you could get him to double S, I think, because I think Saint can get double S in stabs, and that gives you access to, I want to say, the Ashira staff, and maybe like one other thing somewhere. But it's not super notable or anything. It's okay, but probably not worth an endgame slot with a unit that really can't see combat. Like, again, we made fun of Bastion for his 24 speed. Bastion doubles Oliver with his 20 speed. Like, this is not even that. Even if he joined like early part 3, this would not be good speed. His bulk, I mean, his portrait bulk would suggest otherwise, but he does die to a lot of things, unless it's a magical thing. So I guess you don't have to fear long-range magic, but everything else is just going to roast him. And Nosferatu's not going to keep him alive. You could probably purge like a thing or two. His magic is decent, but again, you have other options for this, like Sanaki can use purge. So unless you need double purge on something, probably not super relevant. It kind of ends there. And he doesn't have any pre-endgame utility because he's probably going to be one of the last people you recruit, one of the last people you get before the tower. And he has like the least things to do. Like I managed to do like 1 or 2 things with him. Like I think I shoved Raphael, which he probably really enjoyed. And then he can probably maybe open a chest or chip one enemy, but it's all peanuts. It's not super relevant. So he's just a unit you bring for fun, like once in your life, just to enjoy the fact that you're using Oliver. You can see his support conversations, which are hilarious. You can see his boss conversations, which are also super funny. But clearly this unit was here for comedic intents and not for serious, don't try this at home things. Yeah, would not recommend for any kind of gameplay purposes, but he is hilarious. Have you ever tried using him like in 0% or anything?
No, I've totally dismissed like anything Oliver. I understand like people really like the meme about him. To be honest, I don't really get the meme either. And people are always like, "Oh, bring Oliver, he's so good and whatnot." But it's like, I already deride Bastion for being like a second copy of Sanaki, except he costs a deployment slot. Like this is a second copy of Mekkah, except like, okay, first of all, a second copy of Mekkah, really, dude? But like, also, he doesn't even do anything better than Mekkah, because things like, like Matrona staff or Escher staff, you could have 0 all your stats, and the effect of those stabs is the same no matter what, right? So like, why do I care that his stats are technically higher than Mekkah's when Mekkah is just going to get the Matrona staff and use it just as well as he would have? Like, why do I want to replicate my worst free unit? That's why I'm not really huge onto Oliver. I guess like, yeah, sure, there are strats where I enjoy using stabs for utility, but even then, something like Alincia uses a rescue staff very well because she can fly as she uses it, so she can reach the position that you need to rescue to. Or Bastion has like longer range with physic if you really care about that kind of thing. So I really think like there are so many units who outclass Oliver at the job he's trying to do, and even those units are bad. So like, why would I really care about using this guy?
Yeah,
I hit my elbow on something.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, I think we're good on Oliver too. Not a whole lot to say about him beyond what we've already said.
He's kind of crap. Yeah.
Let's get to a unit that I know you do kind of like, because now we're getting to units that legit just join when you enter the tower. Like these are just units that even if you somehow massacred everyone else at the end of the game, you still have these units. The first one I have on my list is Renning, the Gold Knight. So I have never brought Renning to endgame, so I'm going to summarize what I do know about him, and I would like you to supplement that with your own, probably more extensive knowledge. So he's kind of bulky. You probably take a hit or two from generals. I checked their speeds specifically for Renning because I was like, how close is this guy to doubling generals? The answer is they have somewhere between 25 to 27 speed, maybe some with 24. So he'll double like a small amount of them, but not all of them. So he's another one of those units you could give a speed wing to, but again, it would only literally be for that map probably, because beyond 4E1, I don't think Renning has like a whole lot he can do. He can also use a Wormslayer to fight in 4E3, which is also decent, I guess, but again, how many units can replicate that? Probably a lot. So personally, I'm not a super big fan of Renning, unless you're playing something like 0% growth. In that case, I can probably see it. But outside of that, unless you have like a lot of deaths, I don't really see the appeal, except the fact that he just comes with swords, which is a good weapon type, because like we said for Stefan, you have a lot of swords you can bless. So is there any appeal to Renning beyond what I've already said, which is not a whole lot?
Yeah, so the fact that he has like 29 speed and not 30 means he's like just barely able to double a lot of these like generals with hammer, which is like really, it's such a downside, right? Like, yeah, he can wield the hammer and that is nice, but man, the fact that he only gets like about a half to a third of them is like kind of obnoxious. And so like I used to be really hot on this guy, like, dude, look at his stats, and frankly they are pretty good, but honestly I feel like I'd rather bring some other guy, because one of his issues too is that like he's level 16, and it's the kind of thing where like, he only needs 1 point of speed, right? He only needs 1 point of speed, and if he was like level 8, then I would feel fine Bexping him. But like, dude, come on, this guy here, like, I'd rather just...
I wanted to bring that up too, because I don't know if you have his growths in front of you, but speed is like one of his lowest growths too. Like, he has more defense, he has more strength, he has more skill, so he's almost... And he is like, his speed is tied with HP 40%, so he's almost never going to get speed from Bex.
Oh, I would do something like 99 in the Blossom. Like, that's what I would do.
Oh, fair enough. That's smart.
So, like, and then like, okay, you just find one general whom you do double. Certainly there's one, right?
Yeah.
And then you just kill him and get the last point of EXP.
For me, he was behind the others.
Yeah, no, oh no, he's behind them all. Give him pass too. There you go. Do the investment. But yeah, no, like I think again for blessing swords, this guy's pretty good. It's just like his join and his top end, they're both like adequate in the sense that like he can scrap with generals and eventually he'll win, right? Or he can like use Wormslayer or Alondite against dragons and like do kind of fine there. But I really think that like, you know, you kind of want to bring a unit who's doing better than just like kind of fine. Again, if the blanket statement I said earlier, you've probably trained up units who are better than him, but if you haven't, he's perfectly serviceable. He's like perfectly fine. It's just, boy, this 29 speed is such a drag. Can we please have 30, right? So I do think axes and swords are by far the best weapons. Like you're probably gonna have tons of forged hand axes that are really nice for your 1-2 range. Being able to use the hammer is amazing. Being able to use the Wormslayer is amazing. Being able to use Alondite and Vacati is totally great for him as well. And so, like, I kind of like him for those things, but it's so weird. He's like he's the mid one, right? I would use Volke and Stefan before I use Renning.
That's weird. I kind of like Renning in theory better than Stefan, but that's just splitting hairs, I guess. Okay. Let's get into some more exciting units, shall we? Not that Renning is like not in any way exciting, but there are some units I'm really excited about, just because of how good they are. So I think we should talk about Knigas first because we actually used them in our playthrough, and then Giftgas is the Knigas that has to transform turn 1, really, when you think about it, with some small differences. But these next units are very similar. I absolutely adore using Knigas. I've said it before, so I'll just briefly repeat. I will always bring at least one Royal to the tower just for the sheer force of power that they exert over the enemy, the sheer amount of dominance they bring. The fact that they just, again, ignore all the Legu's drawbacks, or half of them, using Form Shift, just always staying transformed and being able to attack on turn 1. And then Knigas is just the best physical unit in the game when it comes to just raw damage output and how much he receives. Like, his defense increases to 44 after he like transforms. He can stand on like a tile to give him extra +10 just for extra dominance. His HP is the best number, which is 76. He's got capped skills, so he just never misses and roars like a lot, like about half the time with 46 skill transformed. He has just enough speed to double, well, everything you really care about at first, and then if you really want to, you can probably get him higher, although I personally prefer Knigas just because you don't have to invest in him at all. And he's so good. Obviously joins with double S-Strike. I think he might have like the highest attack stat in the game, barring some weird exception that I'm not thinking about. Like, he's just so strong. There's like one thing he's afraid of, and that's fire mages. There's like mages with, I think, arc fire in the first part of the tower, but I gave him Nullify and just ignored that shit because he has the skill capacity to take it on. He just doesn't care what you give to him, and he doesn't need any super intensive resources, and Nullify, you have 2 of them probably, so it's probably worth giving to him, and he just kills like everything that attacks him at 1 range in just 1 go. He's so good. Also like giving him pass, so he just walks by everyone that's like blocking his way just to get like the perfect spot for him to enemy face as much as he can. He's so good, and I love using him. What about you?
Yeah, the pass, the parity, you're totally correct to that at base. He just like has the highest attack, and by a lot. Well, by a lot, like Gifka's next up, like not that far behind, but I mean, this is like okay, he can't fly, but man, does he just kill everything he touches, right? It's nuts how strong this guy is. And like, yeah, sure, you only get him for the tower, but I like you said, you'd be kind of foolish not to bring them, or not to bring like at least one. And I think Knigas is a pretty good choice because, I mean, you look at these stats, there's nothing to be desired with these stats. He just has everything he could possibly ever want. And again, with the form shift, it's really good. Just total like turn your brain off, activate as Legu's form, and then just attack the enemies and kill them. Really good unit. I really adore Knigas. Like, there are a few things that other royals can do that he can't do. Like, I think every single royal has at least one thing that he can't do. One of them is the 17 speed is just barely not enough to double the auras, which I know is like 8 enemies in the game, but still it's like a pretty important thing for royals to be doing. And it's like, it's kind of annoying that he can't really do that, whereas everyone else like is able to do that, either with White Pool, or I think Nasala and T-Barn can do it without White Pool.
Yes.
But, you know, the Nyla and Gifka can do it with White Pool. And by the way, I say like the 5 royals, I totally count Gifka as a royal. Like, I know there's some debate about whether or not he is, but I totally count him, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, shall we go to him? Because
yeah, it's kind of hard to really say more about Kynagus because he just like totally kicks butt and destroys everything, right? Whereas
Yeah.
I think Gifka's a little bit more interesting because there are a couple quirks to him.
yeah, for the most part, I do think Gift is mostly just the Kynagus you have to transform on turn 1, because he doesn't have form shift, but he does have the massive capacity that other Laguz Royals have, so he's just kind of weird like that. But his stat layout is mostly the same with a couple of weird small differences. But for the most part, everything we said about Kynagus applies to Gifka. You put him in range of someone when he's transformed, and the enemies are dead afterwards. Like, you just enter and go make a sandwich, and when you come back, the enemies are dead unless they attack the 2 range. That's it. And you get a Laguz gem for free in his inventory. That's a good suggestion by the game to be like, hey, maybe use this on this unit so he stays transformed. But honestly, you could also use Laguz Stone because his gauge is so massive, it doesn't even really matter. The key difference, I think, is that Kynagus, let me just double check this. Yeah, so Gifka has more strength and more speed at base. I never realized this. Oh, they have like, yeah, that's kind of funny. I always thought they had one of them had more strength and the other had more speed, but actually Gifka is better in both ways. Either that or Gifka got a strength transfer.
You have a strength transfer on Gifka.
I could swear he's went with cap strength here as well, but I guess I'm wrong.
No, you have a strength transfer. Kynagus is 22 strength. Gifka is 21.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, so that's the thing with Gifka. I forgot to mention that, but normally he has 21 at base. But because we played Path of Radiance beforehand and brought Gifka to endgame in Path of Radiance, like just made the choice to bring Gifka, he ended up transferring strength because he joins with cap strength there. So that's why he has 23 here, whereas he might have 21 for you. That's, I guess, a big difference because Kynagus doesn't have access to any kind of boost like that because he's not in Path of Radiance as a playable unit. And then Gifka also has a speed advantage to 36, which, I mean, you probably know this better than I, so that apparently that puts him in an easier spot to double auras, right?
So that allows him to double auras with White Pool, whereas Kynagus needs that 1 strength in order to do it. Another pretty important thing, actually, is that Gifka with parity is the only unit in the game who can one-round the 4e4 boss at base.
Oh,
and
wow.
He's the only one who can do it. The other Royals have 2 little strength, and then Kynagus has 2 little speed. There's actually a fact that I think I forgot this fact in my most recent Iron Man, and actually like lost Kynagus in 4e4 because of that. I was like, oh crap! I totally forgot that you need to use Gifka for this role. You can't use Kynagus for it. So I do think that like in many ways, Gifka's combat is actually just better than Kynagus. And I understand that there's kind of like the chore of using the Laguz gem as opposed to attacking something on turn 1 can kind of sour people to the idea of using them. But I do just outright believe that, you know, Gifka's just the better unit. Kynagus does have more bulk, so he's able to do like both Kynagus and Gifka could do things like survive a ire proc from the boss of 4e3. You know, Kynagus is a little bit better because he has slightly higher defense, but the fact that Gifka's is like enough really goes to show, you know, like how powerful and bulky both of these 2 units are.
Yeah, I think I'm less concerned with the fact that like he can't attack turn 1. Like, that's annoying, and it's one less enemy I can remove before I vigor him, because obviously I'm going to vigor my best unit on the field, which is probably them. But I think my main annoyance might be that I have to... I can't move as far on turn 1. That might be a little bit annoying. But at the same time, if you're going to vigor him, it doesn't really matter, right? Because he can't move out of Raphael's range. So how much does that move really matter? Not really, right?
Yeah. Well, don't they have the same move, though? Because, like, Kynagus also has to walk on transform and then transform, right? So.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally wrong. Yeah, never mind. Doesn't matter. Yeah, sure, I can see it. I chose Kynagus because I wanted to kill a general on turn 1 in 4e1. That's really about it, really.
I mean, that's a good reason. So, like, that's that is a map where the turn 1 Laguz gem, like, really matters. Like, 4e1 and 4e5 is, like, you really want to be able to attack guys on turn 1.
Yeah.
So
in 4e3, you start transformed, right? You just attack right away, I think. Or rather, you start with full gauge, I should say.
Yeah, everyone starts with full gauge on 4e3, but you still have to use the stone, I'm pretty sure.
You do? But if you're full gauge, you never have to use the stone with normal Laguz.
Well, you still have, like, gauge.
Well, yeah.
Like, your gauge can still deplete, but... Yeah, I guess you're right. You can just shift if you are going to, like, 1 turn or 2 turn the map or whatever. Like, you can just shift. But if you're going to, like, play the map long, then you're going to run out of gauge if you do it normal. So. Yeah,
fair enough. You might have to, like, at some point you can just revert Laguz gem, I guess. But I have, like, nothing better to do. Yeah. It's kind of the same, almost the same debate between these two, between, like, Raisin and Raphael. Like, if the turn is going to last a long time, the map, then the difference kind of depletes because you're going to be transformed most of the way. But if a map is only going to be, like, 1, 2, 3, 4 turns long, then I think the value of being able to do something on turn 1 is bigger. But generally, the difference is negligible, I think, besides like the few scenarios.
But I really like Gifka. He's probably my favorite royal just because like his stats are so big compared to everyone. It's like it's silly what he's able to do.
He's big. He's a big boy. Okay, that's the combat units covered for the most part. We have a couple of like more utility-like units or training projects in some cases. So we have some dragons basically to talk about.
There we go.
First one being Enna. I like dragons, but in this game they're like kind of weak sauce combat-wise at base, and Enna is probably the least interesting one, but also arguably the most useful one. It's kind of strange. So she's around for technically all of endgame, but I generally only deploy her for like 2 maps, 3 I think, because in 4E1 and 4E2 I just don't think it's responsible to deploy her in like an Iron Man like setting. She's kind of die. She has 13 defense and no speed to speak of. But she has one thing going for her, and it's Blood Tide. Anyone who's next to her gets +5 strength and speed. This is a massive bonus, or massive boon, and a massive bonus. A massive bonus. So if you're adjacent to her, you just become that much better at combat. And the 4E3 enemies don't attack her, so she can also be a bit of a wall there while also providing that boost. And that's kind of huge. Both the accuracy and the +5 damage are just so massive, especially in the final map, that it's worth using her and worth working around her weaknesses. But in the other maps where she can be attacked, it's not really worth using her. But just for the couple maps where she is useful, I do think she's really nice. I think of her less as a unit and more as like a movable terrain tile that can die if you're a little bit careless. But the bonus of that terrain tile, just 5 extra damage, 10 if you're doubling, plus 10 hit on each of those attacks, plus a little bit of crit, I guess, if that's relevant, but it generally is not. It's just good. There's not too much else to her. It's just, all this is pretty good. It's pretty nice to have, and she's free in endgame, so why not make use of it, right? That's in a nutshell. I don't have a whole lot else to say on her. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate summary. As like, hey, she's the red pool, you can move around. I do think like keeping her alive is not super tricky. Like, I think you do have to transform, but like, you know, if you have her on the map and you have a Laguz Stone, like literally what else are you going to do, right? Like you might as well just use the Laguz Stone and transform her, so that she doesn't die to a bolting or die to a blizzard or something silly like that, which is a real threat. Like I think you're wise to recognize that there's a threat to Ina, maybe so much that you want to undeploy her. I'm a fan of just deploying her, use the Laguz Stone, tank the bolting. You know, it doesn't really matter. You'll probably be fine.
Yeah, she does have good res, to be fair.
Yeah, she has a good res, and once she's transformed too, then she no longer gets doubled. I think there's a temptation to be like, she's just the terrain tile, so I don't need to transform her. But like, dude, like what else are you gonna do with these stones, dude? Just use them, okay? Like figure it out. You'll be fine. Just use the Laguz Stones.
Yeah.
So as far as her combat goes, I agree it's like pretty pathetic, frankly. She has like okayish accuracy against some enemies, and it's very funny. She's actually like the best user in the entire game of those like cards. You know, those like dark magic cards that you can use in the item menu. She's like the best user of those by a lot. I guess like Nasir is technically better, but his attack is also just magic anyway, so who cares? So there are funny things you could do where you like, you know, give Ina a demon card and she like kills a general with it. But aside from that,
just to check, this is physical, right?
Yeah, this is physical.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's funny. I completely forgot about that. Fun trivia for sure. I have to try it out sometime. Never.
It's like a funny thing to do.
For sure. I was actually bribed, I think, into using Enna a bit in the last Iron Man for both FV9 and FV10, but I never remembered using cards with her, so I should keep that in mind next time someone waves money in front of my face. Okay, let's go Kurth next, because he's around for the same time as Enna, just for all of endgame. Another movable terrain tile, but his tide is +5 defense and res. I find it funny you can take these off of units, and you have no reason to because they're free. Like, if they're on the unit, no one else can use them, but you know, +5 defense and res. For how choke point heavy 4E1 is, I definitely use this, like try to take advantage of this in that map, because +5 defense and res can easily make a difference between living and not living, and you can give it to up to 4 units at once if you're being careful. The reason I didn't do this in his playthrough is I wasn't sure which enemies have 2 range and which don't, and Kurth is not fragile per se, but he does have durability problems. 20 speed transformed is not enough to not get doubled by generals and other enemies. I guess he doesn't get doubled by like a bolting stage probably, but a lot of the other things will double him and he'll die. Snipers I would also reckon will double him. He does have 55 HP and 30 defense, which is good, but I didn't feel like it was worth, you know, dealing with it for endgame, and I wanted to simplify my turns as much as I could and not have to like move him out of range of reinforcements and stuff like that. But when he's around after that, it's generally fine. I have trained him in my Iron Man before. It was a lot of fun. You kind of get a return on it, but not really. 4E3, just like Enna, he doesn't get attacked, so he's just that map is just free XP for him. After that map, he gets a new skill. That's called Form Shift. You might have heard of it. It makes it so he can just ignore his gauge problems. But then you only have 2 maps left, and those maps are not very long and not very good for him. He doesn't have the speed to contribute offensively in those maps, nor does he have like the mobility or anything. But, you know, he's funny. He does have like pretty good, I want to say good growths, but not really. Like they're okay, I guess. But it's kind of like in between like the terrain tile utility and the S utility. I don't know what they were going for. I feel like you don't really get a return on investment when you're trying to train him. But I do like the +5 defense and res in 4E1 a bit. So I don't think he's completely useless, but he is definitely one of the worst units if you had to rate him, quote unquote, objectively. But he's a fun training project, that's for sure. Have you ever messed around with him?
Yeah, the fact that he joins like what A rank strike and like level 20 and has this entire map where none of the enemies even counterattack him, right? Like they don't attack him and they don't even counterattack him. Kind of like put this idea in the mind of the community. I feel like that this is the S unit whom you can train up, and it's like I don't like it's fun to do. Again, it's kind of like Palius, where the joy of training him is the training. It's not the reward; it's the training that you do. And like, yeah, if you enjoy that, then by all means, like go ham and get your double S strike, you know, Black Breath weapon. But it's kind of hard to really see the reward because yeah, you only have those 2 remaining maps in the game. It's really not that hard to get units who are better than that activated for those maps in the game. He's even like really slow. Like doesn't he, like when he transform, have like less move than when he's walking around?
Yeah, he does. I think he flies though, so that kind of compensates for it in 4E3. But yes, his move is like bad.
Yeah, his move gets like even worse. So he's by far the worst dragon, right? Like this black pool effect, the defense res is like kind of handy sometimes, but I don't know. I feel like it's way easier to live enemy attacks than it is to kill enemies sometimes. And so I really enjoy the red tide because like, now I can kill the enemies. Or I really enjoyed white tide because it's like, now I can double this really hard to double boss. Whereas with the black tide, it's like, I was already living probably. So why am I like being, why am I like, what's the reward here? What am I really getting
It's
from
less
it?
exciting for sure. I do like it when you do live thanks to black tide, but it is definitely rare.
Yeah, that's true. So again, like there's no, I think if there was like a tile in the tower that gave +10 attack in the same way there were tiles that gave like +10 defense and +10 res, I would be more hot on this ability, right? But
yeah, some kind of life and
it's
death
like,
tile, yeah.
Yeah, no, that'd be funny, like a life and death tile.
Yeah.
But I mean, there isn't one. So again, like if you want to train them up into the whole Est Kurth Naga thing, like by all means, like have fun. You'll end up with a really strong unit, but even then, it's like the top end is not really that impressive to me. So I've never really, I've trained him up a little bit, and I was like, all right, cool, and then just like used all my other units to finish the rest of the game. he always like dies on turn 2 of 45 if you leave him alive too. So like yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's the thing with this game is I think it does a great job of rewarding you for training units before part 4, but then for these units sometimes it just doesn't. I think Kurth Naga is a good example of that. Okay, we can move on to the last 2 units / mobile boosts, mobile unit buffs, but I need to load a different save file, so we're back.
Yep.
Alright, so we have 2 units left, technically 3, but the last one is going to be real brief, and if you thought we were brief on Enna or any of these other dragons, then watch us be brief about Gareth real quick. I made a whole, I think it was an actual waifu video about Gareth and what he can do, even though he's only around for 2 chapters, and in one of them, honestly, I wouldn't even deploy him because I don't think he can do anything really in 4E4. And in 4E5, though, I do think he is great for support. I don't know if I would call him a good unit or just a good thing that supports you. Like, he is a terrain tile that boosts your strength and skill just like Enna does. It does take a little more work to make him survive, but I think it's really as simple as put him on a ward tile and transform him. And maybe you might have time to like give him ward or at some point use a pure water if you're taking a longer time. Then he survives just fine. But he did used to have a really bad reputation for survival on this map. That was why he was called like a really bad unit. But in the end, it's just a free asterisk +5 strength, +5 skill that you have for however long your final map lasts. And it's good. The enemies you have to hit in that chapter are really evasive. So you want that 10 extra hit. And they also have a lot of HP. Then you want to kill these enemies before you move on, because if you leave them alive, they'll just heal and be more obnoxious. So you want the extra strength as well. All that is really good. It's only there for a very short time, so it doesn't give him a whole lot of credit for tier lists, but it is vitally important, and I would never want to play the game without Gareth, only because the last couple chapters would be very obnoxious without him around. So I think Gareth is good. He's just not there for much. Like, that's basically it for me. That's Gareth.
Yeah, no, we have like there's a whole Gareth video on your channel if you really want to see like, you know, someone talk positively about Gareth for like 12 minutes. And there's the one Gareth video on the internet if you want to see someone talk like negatively about Gareth for 15 minutes or so, right? But yeah, this guy used to have a reputation for being like the worst unit in all Fire Emblem, right? Like, people hated this guy because they're like, oh my gosh, look at this defense, but there's no more physical attacks. So like, there is a physical attack, dude. Yeah, come on, get over it.
You're always gonna face it, probably too.
Yeah, like it. Yeah, if anything, like the only attack in the game might actually be a physical attack. Come to think of it, like if you're really quick about it. But yeah, no, I mean the Red Tide is really good. He's like an always deploy in 4E5. I wouldn't really call him an always deploy in 4E4 just because of like the context of the map. You might not really need the Red Tide effect, but if the Red Tide was like really good, I would absolutely bring him above, I don't know, like Soth, right? Like, come on, who are you really gonna field who's better than Gareth? He's just so good. Even his attack, like this 44 strength attack, it's a bit shaky. It's got like a 60% hit rate every time you fire it, but like, I mean, hey, it still like hits for a lot of damage every time you use it. And like, what are you gonna do? Not attack? Like, once you've used the Lagoon Stone, you're kind of set as far as your survivability goes. So just keep on going and like attacking and doing whatever it is that you want to do. I really do like him. I think Red Bull's strong. I think he's an absolute great deploy in the final map. And yeah, no, like my eyes have been opened. He's not the worst unit in all Fire Emblem ever. Like, go figure.
I will add one more quick life hack for if you have trouble keeping Gareth alive. I don't think it's difficult. What you have to do is have Provoke. Just have it, and then give it to one of your Lagoos, preferably, or anyone who only has one range. And they will always draw away the magical attacks that could kill Gareth, and he will not die. He will be fine, because enemies are stupid, and they will try to 2-range the enemy with Provoke, because they think, oh, that's a great juicy target, and they'll just ignore Gareth. Gareth also Okos on the counterattack, so that also probably further dissuades them. But yeah, that's Gareth. One more terrain tile left, whoops, spoilers, is Nazir, and he is probably the easiest to use dragon with regards to these things we've mentioned, because he has a massive 42 res, so all these problems about magical attacks or people having bad durability kind of go away, because Nazir doesn't really care about magical attacks. He is, I think, the highest base res in the game, probably. And then White Pool is also just like very straightforward, and what it does is it makes a unit double, and I don't know the exact benchmarks off the top of my head, but I think you need 34 attack speed to double with or without White Pool. You know the numbers better than I, but he helps units double, and some classes can't even do it without Nazir's help, even if they cap their speed. So he is super welcome. Just especially units with Nihil really appreciate Nazir, because they have to do most of the lifting. There's 2 skills that really help you in like late game Raining Dawn when it comes to like tough boss fights and sub-boss fights. And the skills are Parity and Nihil. Parity is best used on a unit with high speed by themselves to ignore enemy terrain bonuses, like Tabar and like your True Blades, like Nasala. But if you use Parity, you ignore the White Pool bonuses, the +5 speed that Nazir gives you. So you don't want to pair Parity with White Pool, but you want to pair it with Nihil instead, because Nihil does not ignore your own skills. So that's a good combo. He technically also boosts magic. I find this kind of useless, because most magical units don't perform very well offensively anyway at that stage of the game. But if you are using them, then you probably want to take advantage of White Pool when you can. And it's probably going to be kind of simple, because 1-2 range gives you a lot of flexibility where you're going to go. But generally, I think the meat and potatoes of Nazir is the +5 speed. And that's kind of all he does. Like we said about the other dragons, you just use your turn to use a stone, and then he's good. You don't have to do anything else with him. So the fact that he has gauge or anything doesn't matter, and he doesn't have to do anything himself. The units next to him are going to be doing most of the work. So yeah, that's Nazir, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the speed is just such a huge boost. It's like taking a unit who doesn't double and making them double. I mean, okay, it doubles their attack power, yes, but like, come on, guys, it doubles their attack power. It's so incredibly powerful, like in this end game, and it's so important to do. I do want to say, like, you kind of mentioned how important it is to have the attackers with him with Nihil. And it is important to notice if you look at his skills, he actually has a copy of Nihil, so don't forget to take it off of him and put the Nihil onto a different unit who's attacking with Nasir.
Oh yeah.
Oops. Yeah. Sorry there. It's like, you know, he doesn't really use Nihil well at all, right?
No,
so
I think he literally just comes with it, so you have an extra copy because it's so good in the chapters that he's around for.
Yeah, no, it's so amazing. Maybe he like had it in Path of Radiance. This is a reference or something. I really can't remember. But yeah, no, the white pool boosting magic. I think I had needed it once ever for like some weird double siege tome strat, but like I don't think that ever is going to come up ever again. I don't know. Just like use him to double. He's so crazy. So the specific benchmark, by the way, is you need 39 speed to double like the end game enemies. So if you have 39 or higher speed, you can just do it without white pool. If you have 34 to 38, then you can do it with white pool. If you have less than that, not a chance.
Well, shit. Well, shit.
Yeah.
Next time. Yeah. Okay. There is one last unit that we could discuss. The problem with that unit is I don't have him on screen yet because my save is still at 4E3, which is a chapter we're going to be live streaming if you didn't know already. And the other problem is that I don't have a stat screen for him because they don't have any growths. They don't level up. So I don't have any fancy graphics for that there. I also know Raisins. I think you said you never recruited this guy, so there's not really much to say about him other than theory, right?
Yeah, I've never. I mean, I can look at him and say, here's what I would do. But
yeah.
Holy crap, what? I'm looking at stats now. It's kind of good. Holy
yeah, they're kind of good. This unit, for me, he will do some chip damage to one of the enemies that you have to kill. Or they will use the Ashera Staff to heal all your units, or they will use like Purge or Fenrir to hit something for fun. Like if you have another unit blessed one of those things, he can use them, and that's kind of cool, I guess, but not super worthy of deep analysis. I think this person is okay. I wouldn't rank him very high on a tier list, but if you have them, if you manage to fulfill all the requirements to recruit them, which you kind of have to know beforehand to do, you know, it's a fun little reward. It makes endgame slightly easier because you have a free global heal on all your guys after they take a bunch of damage from the late game, endgame final boss things. But not too much else to say about that. What is your theory thoughts on this person?
I mean, you know, I can take a look at his stats right now. It's like, oh, his stats are really good, but you know, you kind of have to like bless a good tome for him because he still can't attack without a blessed tome, right? And again, just like, I feel like the most valuable thing he brings is not himself, but the item with him, right?
Yeah, the Ashera Staff.
It's like,
I did mention that.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, another one of these units where, you know, similar to what I was saying with Micaiah, or similar to what I was saying to like Oliver, he could show up and have like half his stats, right? He could like untransform or something, right? And he would still probably be about as good because he still has that staff. So again, like the final map of the game is, it's very climactic. It's very fun to kind of like train your units up and use them in that map. But, you know, actually, I feel like it's unlikely that you'll get to the final map and be like, oh, I'm really like against the ropes here and I need some help. And then this guy shows up and actually is the help that you need. Because I feel like you probably won't have the blessed tome ready for him. You know, the staff that he brings only like, the staff that he brings is only as good as the units that he's healing, and so I feel like if he shows up, you either have the chapter sorted or you don't have the chapter sorted.
Yeah.
Right?
He just
like,
lightens the load
really
a bit.
Yeah,
I think he just lightens the load a bit on a chapter that he's like decent in, but he's not going to make it go from impossible to possible. Is that kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it's like he adds another pretty face to the map, I guess. That's like, you know, what he does.
He is technically a unit, that's for sure. I'm being vague here because the person is kind of a spoiler. I wanted these to be a bit accessible, but yeah, that's that sorted. That's technically not a character analyzed. We have been going for a good 1.5 hours, so I think this is probably a good time to wrap it up. So once again, thanks everyone for watching. Hope whatever chore you were doing as you were listening to this is now all done and ready, and you're ready to eat dinner or whatever it is. And we'll hopefully see you at the finale, which the date I'll put in the editing again if need be. Raisins, thank you for joining me once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, we'll see you all next time.
See you next time.